Adelaide, Corruption City, Part 1 Without Prejudice. Adelaide's finest corrupt ivory tower rulers, directing and herding the sheep from their ivory towers of corruption, rotten to the core. Sure, maybe the majority of cops are honest in Adelaide, and I have found the good ones always bury their heads in the sand while the corrupt ones are running rampant. I always found the rest of the state to be fair to muddling. Back in the early 90s, I was a country bloke trying to start business in the big city, and I was being very successful for a number of years. I was quite naive to the evil city ways. I just wanted to stay off the dole and pay my own way in life. But apparently when you're not a local in Adelaide, they will set you up for any number of things for a big fall. In my previous business in the Northern Territory, I had heard this from oligarch squatters when I first started the business in Adelaide. I had a customer from a big department store, a store manager. I asked him what they were like in Adelaide, and his reply astounded me. He said they are more rotten to the core the further you go up the tree in Adelaide. As I found out, they were far more rotten to the core than he had said. Totally rotten extreme lefties than I had ever imagined them to be. Set me up. They used more than 200 characters. Suddenly, early March, the cops were turning on sirens going past my main road business, and there were suspicious accidents nearby. I said to a member of the ruling lefty barbarian government, who was always poking his nose in to see what I was doing, who later admitted he was having nervous breakdowns and was a resident at the Adelaide Nut House. I told him there were some suspicious accidents around the place, and his reply should astound the reader. He said, "Oh well, keeps the police, courts and repairers busy, doesn't it?" At this time there were white Valiant cars following me around. When I looked up the road rule book a couple of years later, the significance dawned on me of what they charged me with, driving without due care. And in the road rule book, it's when the person bumps the white Valiant where the charges arise from. So you can see people in the know were trying to warn me beforehand of even what the charge was going to be by following me with the white Valiants. At the time I wasn't wake up to the scum of the earth that exists in the sewers of Adelaide. The cops knew about it too. The plan was hatched and their bosses were a part of it. The far lefty treasurer gave away the state bank money of $13 billion, and they were looking around for someone to set up from the same area for the courts to tear apart and the media to make us song and dance behind the lines, and all the women attacking him. That was me instead of the treasurer. Well, the state bank robbers ran out the back door with the $13 billion and got away scot-free with media attention taken off them, and the newspapers whitewashing the pathway for the bank robbers, declaring they were perfect. They had done everything right. Propaganda media is full of coverage for criminals in government. The 21st of March, this state government criminal had asked me if my car was insured twice on those two dates. When I told him it wasn't, he went away with a mad, insane look of satisfaction on his face. I didn't realise it, but I was looking at a mad dog that should be sentenced in the nut house for life. On the 20th, I was doing business with a new customer. Every time I told him the cost of what he wanted done his reply was Rawley, Rawley. He kept repeating that sentence over and over again. I soon found out why. On the Sunday, the 22nd of March, I was following a car with blacked out windows through the green arrow and green disc on a right turn in the CBD. when suddenly he swerved to the left and I was left facing a reversing car. See how that Jaguar is blocking out virtually the bus? That's what I was following, similar or the same vehicle, covering for the one that was going to reverse. Colliding was inevitable. 3 women in the car, and a bald-headed man came out from a business and said there's a lot of bad accidents just here. So along come long-haired, black-haired policewoman, shoulder-length black hair with freckles. She had been watching me on the 20th and the 21st in the evenings when I parked in the CBD. She was always alone in the police car watching me from a distance. So the tow truck noticed when we left, she and the women had their heads together. He said, "Watch out, they're up to something." So out of 10,000 police in Adelaide, how can someone be watching you from the police car 2 days prior in the evening, suddenly arrive at the accident scene that is arranged to be that way? An old lady advised me later she'd been married to a lodge member. She said it sounds like a Freemason setup. Everyone should know most business, police, politicians are lodge members. That's why they never go to jail. I made inquiries at a lodge and found out most magistrates and lawyers and judges are lodge members. They can't sit on the bench unless they are a lodge member. We all know lodge members rule to suit their own crowd in court. I had worked for lodge members and listened to all their stories from the lodge, goat riding, etc. when I was a kid, onwards in the Outback pubs in 1960. 1960, Les Berkey ran the coppers off the road at Leak Creek. Frank, the local SM magistrate, fined him £90 and suspended his licence for 12 months. However, a couple of years later, Berkey was having a drink at the pub. I was there, Dad was there, and in walked SM magistrate Frank. Les Burke exchanged the lodge handshake with Frank SM, who was taken back and very apologetically said in front of the bar, "Oh, Les, you should have told me. I would have let you off with nothing. See the power of the lodge? I saw it in action as a kid." The charge was driving without due care, as I've explained above. The warning signs of what the charge was planned long before it happened. The customer yelling out the surname, Rawley, that was a surname of the other driver. You can see how these scum use nuts to bring down innocent people with their little nutcase setups. All about the lodge members. Haven't worked for them for decades. They are everywhere, usually in business doing well while the rest of us struggle. I hired barristers and lawyers to deal with the business and shot myself in the foot because they're always taking my money and inventing excuses to stop representing me. At the day of court appearances, there were a dozen lawyers who took my money, pretended to represent me, all criminals, dropping me on the day of my appearance in court. I got a barrister who was really in on the other side. Pretty obvious, all criminals and crooks. It was before Magistrate Curry. I've changed the name of these criminals because they are pure swamp criminals. When they couldn't find the policewoman who came to the accident scene with the long black hair, Mr. Brainwave prosecutor had a secret meeting with my crooked barrister and the magistrate, with me excluded. More crimes committed against me by these low-life faggots, criminals. The three met to work out their railroad plan involving me. I was told to wait outside while they conspired to do the frame-up without actual copper showing up that had come to the accident scene. Then the prosecutor come out, went over the police station. Soon they had another policewoman impersonating the one who come to the accident scene. She had short brown hair, no freckles. The difference was very obvious, and I said to the magistrate, "This is not the one that come to the accident scene." "Shut up," he said, "or I'll have you in contempt of court." None of this appeared in the transcripts. I paid for. They stole pages out of the transcripts. As well, this new constable said, I don't recall when the magistrate said, do you remember what Mr. Case said? I don't recall anything. Then I'll give you time off to refresh your memory. She was sitting next to the prosecutor, who was whispering into her ear. Even my crooked barrister said, who was in with them, they can't do that. That's not allowable. He's putting her up to it. I couldn't sue this criminal magistrate for opening his filthy mouth. All of them working careful, hand in step with other in their businesses, railroading people, framing innocent people. That's their business. They have no other business. I can see they're in the business of lock away criminals. They are the first criminals that should be locked away, with their little stage frame-ups and set-ups to ruin innocent people, especially lone men like me. They would never do it to the sisterhood, because the sisterhood would have all their women mates marching in the street against them to tear down the government. And what have I got as a lone man? I can't depend on any man to stand up for justice. They're all wimply, gutless characters stood over by their jackbooted wives who tell them to disappear and appear with a snap of their fingers. That's how a number of men do as they're told, or else. I went looking for Mr. Baldy at the accident scene, and his two secretary ladies swore black and blue at the business. There were no bald-headed man working there. I had the conversation recorded. After that, I was parked on the hill and photographed Mr. Baldy running bent over past his car in the yard, trying to avoid me seeing him. As he could see me on the hill, he forgot one thing, to cover his baldy head. As he ran into the business, I got the photograph of Mr. Baldy's head. That's 7 young women so far telling lies and setting me up. Their insurance lady, another one. I went to the Supreme Court, and the court's prosecutor, another one, and 2 secretaries walked out to stop me getting good lawyers. That's 11 women, young women so far. How many do they think they need to bring me down? We can add the wife of the tow truck driver. He clearly saw and remarked on the copper with the long hair, heads together, with the 3 women. Suddenly suffered amnesia. Just a couple of months later, didn't remember anything about the accident. Definitely don't want to remember the long-haired copper, otherwise I could blow their case out of the water. His wife was glaring at him, and he knew he had to claim amnesia at the accident scene, because she would end up booting him out of the house later if he didn't do as she told. There are many more. I went to the interstate newspaper in the CBD complaining about being set up like this, and then the femo-Nazi reporter made out false complaint. I was out to get one of the women, initiating crooked detectives, one, Baxter, to come out and threaten me to stop investigating the matter. That's number 12 so far, and she worked for a prominent Melbourne newspaper. More criminals. How far do they stretch? Covering the truth and ruining people like this. So far in touch with politicians. One I approached lost his seat. Lost his seat within days, and then I got in touch with a famous small political party, and the boss Ian said over the phone, I explained it to him, they can't do this to you. He declared he was appalled by this business in the courts. He would have the matter investigated immediately. Ho, 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 he had no idea what he was up against. The police had him on trumped-up fraud charges, forcing him to resign the very next day. For years I'd complained the state government was listening into my telephone like others. That's why they move so quickly in the morning on him. The evil lefties quick at installing listening devices aimed at your house, with one intention to bring you down and stop the public from dealing with you, because they've got a lot of things they want to cover up. The lefty crowd don't approve of you, and I worked this out long ago. Then the clerk of the civil court broke out of the nut house and asked to stay at my house because he was on the run from the cops. To put him back in the nut house, he said, "We'll fix your case in your favour, just visit me at the nut house." I should have been aware of the old saying, don't trust people who work for the court. So I went to the civil court and brought along a car repairer who had purchased the opposition's car and repaired it for $600. But the insurance company wrote it off for $7,500 loss, all criminals. Then the opposition lawyer, Femo-Nazi number 13, kept signalling behind my back. Every civil court magistrate come into the room to dismiss them so they would end up getting a criminal court magistrate. What they wanted now, that's another crime they committed. Criminal court magistrates have no jurisdiction in ruling in civil courts, and he dismissed the repair bill on the car and declared I had to pay the $7,500. So I went along to the CBD and the opposition lawyers. When I walked in to pay them, they were calling me pig and F and C and everything they could think of. What a pack of dogs. Obviously wanting me to give them a few black eyes is what they were looking for. I would declare Adelaide lawyers I dealt with are the biggest pack of mongrel pig bastards one would ever read about. Nobody's going to put the story to the population like I am. This is the real truth of what they've done to me. And every other young man that thinks they're going to start a business in the big city, they will drag you down by some means and get you through the woman you live with, or use other women to set you up and attack you, or by other means back to the Supreme Court. Mr. Corruption Judge declared when I told him Magistrate Curry had switched policewoman from the accident, and the impersonator lady cop gave evidence about what I was supposed to have said. And of course he's protecting all the lodge members involved when he makes the declaration she was one and the same from the accident scene. Can you beat that? A Supreme Court judge making up the case with no evidence, not asking me to come up with any, just making his own decision to suit the establishment in Adelaide. So after reading this, the reader should beware of the city of evil. No churches, not churches. Sure, maybe a couple of hundred were involved. It's still there, still rotting to the core, corruption city. And I have 500 photographs of insane criminals trying to run me off the road in Adelaide. There is nowhere I can take these back then or even now, except advertise what they get up to in Adelaide. Where can I gather a bunch of men and wave placards on Parliament House and demand justice? Government is weaponised against men in favour of the women, who they know control the votes of the household. Women, they rule the roost and the household. Women rule with an iron fist. Upsetting the women can cause the government to fall. Look what happened with Prime Minister Morrison. Grace Tame eyeballing him on television, and Brittany Higgins marching with a street full of women on Parliament House. The new Labor government paying out $3 million for what? To soothe down the ruffle feathers of the women. Where are they now, marching on Parliament House with the Labor crowd in power? They're all bullshit. upsetting the men is not a problem. They don't count. They are under feminazi rule. You can't trust your relatives when they belong to any institution. Auntie, who admitted she was a Freemason when I told her, I was set up in court by a Freemason magistrate, lawyer and prosecutor. She arrived with Sydney with one intention, to steal the previous lawyer's police statement from the other driver, where she admitted to reversing into me at the time of the accident. Auntie telling me to shut up. I don't want to hear about any of this again after the court case was over. And the Mother Superior of the convent obviously profit from Auntie setting me up like that, because they knew she was someone I trusted, and the reader can see they used my auntie in the convent to set me up, to save the golden robbers of the state bank, making me out to be some kind of terrible character. And I found out Auntie's convent, the superior was funneling all the money from the convent to her nephew in Sydney. All robbers and schemers. God is just a weapon they use to make money with and build their mansions. I know a lot of the inside of the convent. The nuns were often sent out every day and don't come home until they have money from someone somewhere. Auntie was serenading an old person who left her several houses, and she rushed the superior with all the houses. Enough said. When the media were launching propaganda, whitewash stories about the state government done everything right, it was all the fault of the bank manager. They could not extradite the bank manager from Victoria. Propaganda. Lodge bullshit covering for the robbers. The state government used her and a number of other nutcases, 6 I can point to set me up as a fall guy for the courts, to tear apart instead of their bosses. You'll see how they all operate, what's going on with Donald Trump in America. It's same old lefty politics in Australia. They shit the nest and then they look around for scapegoats to put in jail. These are criminals running the state government all across Australia. Same worldwide crowd. The gas company were tearing up the gas pipe in the city and issuing court proceedings over it. The council was trying to shut me down. A couple of other court cases were lost because I beat the men in the court. This time around they thought they would use numerous women to bring me down, because the judges won't rule against women, because there's no use men arriving in a mini skirt like women are doing. It doesn't have the impact the women have. It is clear the women are going to who they're going to vote for, and there is proof again in the power of women marching. Governments fall. That's why they fear the women more than anything, and that's why the government is fawning and sucking up to the women, making sure the magistrates in the Black Stump family court rule in favour of women all the time. I had a certain suspicion about a certain character called Paul Eats the Wrecker in Adelaide. He knew about my accident before it happened. From where what he was talking about a week before it happened. So I popped a recording device in my pocket, and when I told him someone said he knew about my accident before it happened, his reply should shock the reader. Whoever's talking had better shut up. This clearly is a large gang operating in Adelaide to ruin people they don't like and set them up as fall guys as they please, as they are hired to do by the Ivory Tower bunch. Then the clerk of the civil court escaped from the nut house and requested refuge in my house to stop the police taking him back to the nut house. I had met him previously doing some work for him, claiming he worked in a warehouse. It was actually the courthouse. Liar, he was in the nut house. He asked me to visit him, where his wife was signing him into the nut house every weekend. Can you see and understand how the femo Nazis in Adelaide are total dictators? in the house, like everyone in this story, full of lies, just like was a corruption city part 2 Sebastopol. Now a list of the nuts from the nut house that set me up. 1. Auntie in the convent was having regular visits to the psychiatrist, certified bipolar schizophrenic. Clerk of the court admitted taking schizophrenic medicine. Certified state government right-hand man poking his nose in the door admitted to nervous breakdown and taking bipolar medicine. This is who they use to attack me. They just don't use the nuts they don't like. Just use the nuts. Everything will be fine. No one will suspect a thing. The driver of the other vehicle I found out was having a nervous breakdowns. Another nut. And the other nut repeating the surname of the other driver. I saw him in the nut house when I visited the clerk of the court. I was up against, I found out later, was a regular visitor to the mental institution, one of the magistrates I was up against. All of them playing their part in the railroad business they frame up. Railroad experts, mongrel dogs. I was told by a security guard customer later that this was common practice with police. When they can't find evidence, they would find coppers to give false evidence, to get perceived evidence, to get a conviction against innocent people. These are mongrels. That's 6 inmates of the nut house they used against me. Who controls the nut house? State government departments. Warning to other men starting business in Adelaide, this is a system they use to bring you down without using the coppers directly. Another 2 women were on the charge sheet now, who never appeared in court. Talk about railroaders. They couldn't shove enough young women up against me from every angle. The ones I could see, multitude more involved in railroading, put up to it by their lodge masters. Need I say more? My advice to young countrymen coming to the big smoke, Adelaide, whatever you do, don't stop. Leave immediately. These people would take your money, your sanity and your life. Laugh all the way to the bank. Like they did with me. When they start talking too much, they ended up in a fatal accident. Don't live with one of these femo-Nazis. They're a nightmare crowd. As you can see, just like Hitler, they're all walking in locked jackboot step against me. Jacob Commission, Royal Commission, kept calling me over what I knew about the state bank collapse. I never heard of them. You can see how they had my phone number, trying to involve me at every turn with their falsehoods. With the collapse of the state bank, the Treasurer resigning within an hour of the police superintendent refusing to drop charges. They had their scapegoat. And I shot back at him. Why are the police switching on the sirens every time they pass my house? Oh no, he said, that's the fire brigade. You got enemies in the fire brigade, Mr. Case. That's the day the Ivory Tower lefties weaponised the emergency services against me. You can see how these criminals make it up on the spot to suit their narrative. Purposes cover their tracks. Lone policewoman in the car, another female Nazi working alone to do a little bit of backstabbing. After the court cases were over, she often drove up next or behind me in the traffic, fingering her long black hair in the same cop car. Normal to have 2 cops in one car. Extremely unlikely to see a lone policewoman in the police car because she had a job to do. This was obviously all planned long before anything happened. Started with the white Valiant sedan following me. It was planned 6 months beforehand at least to use me as a scapegoat for the courts to tear apart instead of their golden treasurer. One of his party henchmen was asking me if I was insured 2 days before the accident. I said it wasn't. He went away with a mad, satisfied look on his face. Obviously they knew they would be getting someone else to impersonate her. When they woke up to what they had done, it was so obvious. That's why they went out to wreck my business with 80% women customers. I lost 15 jobs I had booked in on the day of the accident, and they rang up and cancelled the work within a day. Then Mr. Wadd, another lefty criminal, sent a letter saying he had found $500 owing to me from somewhere. Is this what they thought was a good payoff, to be dragged through the mud by their establishment? $500 lousy dollars. After I paid the $7,500 to the criminal insurance, this is what they do to men in the big cities and elsewhere. No, men are nothing but trash to them, to be used as they see fit. The only people count in their lives are the big shots who cannot go to jail for their crimes because they got all these scumbags in the nut house. Scumbags in the nut house and everywhere in the courts helping to cover their tracks. This is how they do it. Make sure through the establishment that I ended up being next door to raving lunatics knocking on the wall, keeping me awake of a night. Adelaide, Maitland, Sydney, Brisbane, everywhere. I have been media blackout. The media have been told long ago not to talk to me. Prime Minister Desert Head, favourite saying, get a job, but you're not allowed to create your own business. That's a no unless you're a lodge member, otherwise they'll tear you down like they did with me. The FBI are weaponised, and the DOJ in America against Republicans. Who controls them? Radical left Democrats. Same crowd of radical lefties are right here in Australia, everywhere. Years later, I dispute with a regional council in Adelaide. Eventually the commissioner ruled in my favour and shocked the two public servants from the council. He said, make sure you get this through the forum and let this gentleman have his house on his property. And you've all got to be back there by 30th of March. When I returned from my holidays, him and his wife never returned. They had a fatal road accident on the border, so there was another commissioner in the courthouse. And he got the shock of his life, shaken so much, dropped all his paper when a cold voice from the council servants said, when is the funeral? Because when he ruled in my favour, they all went white in the face. After I got the house on the block, I was in a line up again. They sent 3 jokers in a car trying to run me off the road and assaulting me at the police station at Christie's Beach. The police got the details, done nothing as usual. A local politician said, yes, they've got to arrest these 3 men. They can't be doing that, getting away with it. So after a month she was telling me she couldn't do nothing. All of them under the hammer of the lefty ivory tower empire of hideous criminals running the whole show. Down in the sewers, when you walk past, you can see their shiny eyeballs far down in the sewer. That's where they come from. That's where they live. Lefty sewer rats. Coppers, politicians, femo-Nazis. See how they operate in big rat race city? Most of the people, very good in my business. I had no problem. Loads of lunatics on the roads were released from the nut house to try and have collisions with me. I have 500 photographs gathered over the years in Adelaide of criminals trying to sideswipe me and slamming the brakes on while they were all driving up my rear end and operating in gangs. One on the right hemming me in, one on the left, and one ahead, slamming the brakes on. the one behind blowing the horn, driving up my rear. This is happening on main carriageways, not in parking situations under attack from lunatic. Lunatic attack, I know all about it. In fact, I recognise 6 of the drivers as residents of Adelaide Nuthouse, because remember I visited the clerk of the court there a number of times and I saw these jokers coming and going, sitting around holding their heads. So they weren't individual nuts, they actually come from the nut house. I saw them there. Names have been changed slightly. None of the criminals are named directly here because these are murderous sewer rat criminals hiding behind the law to attack innocent people and set them up. These are not Australians, these are treasonous scum. Media mob is absolutely corrupt. They're not reporting the truth, they're not even close to it. The media in Australia is nothing more than mostly propaganda, staged by the government, approved by the government because the government will take their licence off them if they dare to talk about and print the truth of corruption. The amount of innocent people wiped out by these ivory tower swamp morons is not suddenly emerging in America. It's been there all the time. It's coming out of the lefties' Marxist barbarian organisations. They completely destroyed my rights to have a lawyer representing me in court, and I still ended up with one of their barrister hacks who I found out was a member of their party. Marxist lefties, same crowd, same swallow's nest head on their shoulders, mud outside and bird crap inside, bullshit inside. Of course, everyone I dealt with in Adelaide didn't want to deal with me after this fiasco. I have to say they know everything about everyone, and where the wind blows they run with it just like a herd of sheep, running after the leader. He changes course multiple times and they keep running after them. That's how they operate. Marxist lefties, mongrel dogs playing with the mongrel hounds, just a pack of dirty, mangy mongrel dogs. Auntie's religious certified nut, playing with the mongrel dogs and hunting with the mongrel hounds. Women are in control. They're telling men lies. They have to have any chance in court against them. The men need their head examined because they have no chance in the family court against their wife. No hope because they all gang up together, as I have proven in this video. Even if their lodge bosses were putting them up to it, they were happy to participate like a herd of sheep running after the leader. Not one with a brain she was born with, all of them with heads on them like swallows' nest, mud outside and bird shit inside. This applies to the 16 in this court case. Keep your car insured. The barbarians are watching. Stay clear of female officers. They are great at bastardising men. These ivory tower Marxists, lefty scum will set you up and push all the buttons to wreck your business and make you public enemy number 1 with the young women who are like sheep running after the leader, with absolutely brainless leader of the pack. Points, and the whole mob of them will run at you with knives and you'll die from 1,000 cuts. Then this female sheep herd will mill around waiting for their leaders to line up the next attack on you. My final advice, especially to young men and young women who are decent in Adelaide, you've got no hope of beating these criminals running the place, because nowadays the barbarians outnumber the Christians. Adelaide is under barbarian rule, okay? Corruption City Part 2, Sebastopol, 6 lunatics. Adelaide Corruption City Part 1, 6 lunatics in both cases. They have come out of the local lunatic house, setting me up the same day of the month, decades apart. In both locations, the reader can decide about the level of rot in government. Weaponising young women against men, the establishment want to attack you and set you up. How many innocent men in Adelaide jail with this murderous crowd running the show? who have no regard for human rights, common law, or any rights of the individual. The other driver got her payout, drove 100 metres in her new car and had another accident. Accident Incorporated strikes again. And she gets another big payout, weaponisation of the police by the ivory towers, complaints to police complaints, waste of time. Wherever I went afterwards interstate, they ended up getting me paying rent in a unit with a raving lunatic next door knocking on the wall, making noises all night to keep me awake. Criminal act after criminal act they committed against me. The telephone company was drowning out any phone calls with noise and static over the years. In my business at the time, more criminals monitoring my phone calls. Some of my customers ended up in road accidents when they left my premises. The gas company ripped up the lines in the street and was threatening court action to make me pay for it. It's just run of criminal acts committed against me, and the coppers are no use in Australia wherever I go, wherever I've lived in all the states. NTSA, New South Wales, Queensland. All my complaints fall on deaf ears, and weaponised cops are operating, covering the truth and covering for the criminals. Evil state government operatives are following me around, checking who I was dealing with. One day the lawyer would be all in agreement to defend me, and he looked terrible next day because no doubt they were tearing up and down past his house with the sirens on. They would be watching me wherever I went, dealing with anyone, and the people I dealt with would just simply disappear once they spotted these characters watching me. They would be up the road watching my house from their cars. Adelaide's political secret service, making sure the lefties stay in power. Every time I asked to see a sergeant of police about any of these matters, I would be blocked from seeing one. In 2 cases where the constable said there were no sergeant here, I went out to my car and I saw the sergeant in both cases running out to his police car and driving off in a hurry. The ones attacking me need their bird's nest, heads mud on the outside, bird crap on the inside, examined. Let's say it was just an ordinary accident. How much damage? Not much damage. No one was hurt. Does any of the thousands of minor accidents in Adelaide every day, the drivers getting attacked by 16 young women set up in the courts by crooked magistrates and coppers and crooked politicians, when the Royal Commission was over, my lawyers that I had paid and dropped me were there waiting their promised payouts of their deal from the Royal Commission, because it all come onto TV. They weren't there to represent me. Take my money and drop me was their job. They were promised payment to do so. Real names of the guilty have been withheld. These criminals in their ivory towers have enormous power. Hypocrites with their propaganda. This is not the full story. There is much more to it. Supermarkets singing out on the intercom names of the magistrate and the other driver. Lefty radio station, one particular one, singing out the date of the accident decades later, every morning, 22 to 9 a.m, 22 to 10 a.m, and so forth. Leopards don't change their spots. The latest is the anti-corruption ICAC in Adelaide been told to shut its doors. It must have been caught climbing the tree too far up and finding the fruit more rotten to the core the further they go up the tree, no doubt. This happened 28 years ago, but I feel it should be brought to the attention of decent people worldwide of what their own lefty governments can get up to. Just like the USA, Australia has weaponised government agencies against men and anyone who's not lefty. They are a massive hoax, pretense of democracy, freedom of speech back in the 90s. you could only get your film developed by a chemist. Of the 11 I used, because each one was destroying the photographs if they contained images of criminals trying to engage me in a crash. I always carried a camera in the passenger seat and I was very quick with it. I would recognise these criminals coming at me looking for an accident. So I kept changing chemists with no change in attitude. One crowd destroyed the compromised photographs and the next ones were no different. The only photos were clear of photos of insignificance. They would blot out the photos of the criminals trying to run me off the road or stage an accident. All of them were in on it in Adelaide. One gang, 5% rule with an iron fist. In the whole place, 95% of the rest of you are like shorn sheep. Only the wool left over the eyes is mandated to be left. Anyone convicted of lifting the wool off the eyes gets a caning. Funny, when I went to Brisbane, the rolls of film, no matter where I left them, the photos were clear and sharp, every one of them. I've been around Australia 6 times, lived in and regularly driven through all capital cities, small cities, highways, F3, F7, M5, M3, etc. The Harbour Bridge and Tunnel, all made Sydney Harbour Bridge and Tunnel, all major highways, Hornsby or Liverpool, Wollongong, Brisbane, Melbourne, Geelong, Perth, everywhere. And I have gone through thousands of right-hand turn with green disc and arrow in the last 3 decades, thousands of times, millions of kilometres travelling Australia, country, towns, everywhere. I have never come across a single car stalled or reversing or broken down, stopped in a right-hand turn, green disc, green arrow. So this says one thing. The one occasion it did happen, all the warnings were there. It was a set up by the lefty barbarians of Adelaide. I've never had any accidents, no red light tickets, no speeding tickets my entire life. Licensed driving. That started in the mid-70s. Deliberate trap set up as described in this story. The lunatics have put onto me. I've had 3 decades disturbing my peace, spying on me, thanks to Adelaide ruthless lefties. And check out my address if you don't believe me about the lunatics. 7th of May 2022, I had to rescue a transvestite lunatic, setting fire to himself in the unit adjoining my own. They shifted me out of the rear unit into the front unit, was burnt out, so he burnt it again and was taken away to the nut house for several months. Where he come from? They could have shifted any normal person into the unit next to me, but they chose to deliberately send in a nutcase. They're so used to setting me up with nutcases next to me, spying on me, being a nighttime nuisance and so forth. Exactly the same thing they've done to me in the last 3 decades. Wherever I go, I end up with lunatic neighbours in the next unit. Do you think I'm entitled to $10 million for all the corruption, standover and wrecking my business and trying to wreck my life for the last 3 decades? I owe all that to Adelaide. Leave your thoughts and comments. And contact me if you want to send some money, because I do believe I'm deserving of a lot of money over this, because this business has never gone away. They make sure of it. Again, what do they do to people that normally will help? I had a small house for sale in Victoria, real estate man from Horsham, about 35, look very smart. Yes, we'll help you at a good price for this. Oh, but not so quick. Remember the insurance man. There were many others. He come out to me 3 months later and said, I can no longer help you sell the house. I'm taking my sign down. He looked like he'd aged like the insurance man 20 to 30 years in 3 months, because I had an insurance man in Adelaide who was handling my car insurance after the accident. And they must have given him hell at his own address, because he looked like hell, the same as this salesman from Horsham. They aged 20 to 30 years in 3 months. No doubt they stuck a listening device on him, and the sirens would be going off when he's having sex or going to the toilet or saying, even whispering something they didn't like. And no doubt harassing him and his family as well. They certainly done something to him to make him age so fast. Just one of the many. You'll see how this creeping lefty corruption operates in Australia. It's all over the place, not just in America. The Democrats, my story here goes back to the middle of the 90s and 80s. What did the department stores manager say? The more rotting to the core, the further up the tree. Rotting is a word meaning it has no ending. Had letters in my letterbox back then about the creeping evil. And I'm very experienced with the creeping evil empire in Australia, who are well hidden in the sewers, deep state corrupt swamp in Australia. This says it all. Hundreds of police sacked when I was living in Sydney. Children crashed judiciary cars in Adelaide. And the RAA man saying at the bottom, I have no hesitation in saying that Adelaide's drivers are amongst the worst in Australia. Police charged, and we all know who he is, Barry Moyse. State government targets swoop and stop frauds. Yeah, swooping in front of people and stopping, but my one was different. They were waiting like a trap just down the road on the right turn. And at the bottom, there's some 500 photographs of criminals trying to engage me in an accident I got from Adelaide. Nowhere to take them because the whole system is corrupt and favours women only.